after Trump was elected, how we discuss people that voted for Trump and this them versus us, it became evident to me that kind of stuff, we got to cut it out, you know? I mean, I have 5 brothers. A couple of them voted for Trump. I'm not going to not say that. I'm in Texas. Of course I got people that voted for Trump. They're awesome individuals. They just wanted to throw the table up. They wanted to throw the table up, and you know what? Sometimes I want to throw the table up too about the Democrats. I wanted to throw the table up when we didn't put anybody in jail after Wall Street. I wanted to throw the table up when we didn't get a public option. I wanted to throw the table up when we didn't get lots of stuff done in the Barack Obama administration that I took off a year of my life to help elect, because we wanted to get along with people. That was our opportunity. And so I think we need to have this reckoning.
All right, welcome. We're here to talk about, as we often are, the Democratic Party. Who better to join us than a Democrat? Lillian Salerno, running for Congress in Dallas. Is it suburban Dallas and part of Dallas? Or?
Lots of Dallas and then a lot of the suburbs. It's a gerrymandered district called the Texas 32.
All right, this being an expensive process, here she is in Washington, where a lot of political money circulates. People come here, they try to grab a little bit of it and take it back to their district, spend it on winning. Now, Lillian, in order to get where she is now, had to win a runoff earlier. If people remember, the famous one was the Laura Moser primary, but there turned out other primaries in Texas that same day. And she advanced along with Colin Allred. The runoff election will be on the 22nd of May, right? So you're in the home stretch.
I'm Colin Allred. I'm running for Congress in Texas's 32nd Congressional District.
I'm Lillian Salerno, and I'm the Democratic candidate for the 32nd District in a runoff on May 22nd. It's not that it's going to be a cakewalk to beat Pete Sessions. He's a formidable opponent.
We're never going to really outspin Pete Sessions. I think what we can do is have a lot more excitement.
I'm running against a young lawyer. We had our first real debate last night, and I just did a contrast of my experience and his. And basically, I've been standing up to power for most of my life, coming to Washington, D.C., advocating for small businesses and nurses. And I just want to come up here and fight for people. And that makes it so maybe I'm not the favored child of the old school Democratic Party, but I'm an old school Texas Democrat, and that's why I'm running.
Your opponent has the DCCC endorsement. Did he get that after the first round of the primary?
Yes, it was after the primary.
Now, normally when we do these, there's something fairly obvious about a person's background. And you say, oh, well, that's why that person got the DCCC background. They're a corporate lawyer, or they're whatever they are. Colin's a different kind of candidate. He was a linebacker in the NFL. Went on to work for the Obama administration, has kind of been a civil rights lawyer. Nothing that jumps out and screams kind of establishment. Why do you think that the DCCC ended up going with him rather than you, given that both of you have viable paths, both to winning the primary and also to winning the general?
Well, I think there's a lot of powers that be at play. One is, we both raising the same kind of money. We had another candidate in our race who was a good candidate, and there was 7 of us. And it just was strange that they came in because, of course, they were talking to me and the other candidate, and Colin. He got more votes, for sure. So that's their reason. But I believe votes matter. But I also believe this is a runoff election. I'm confident we're going to win because we need to win, because we need to win back the House. And I believe I have a clearer path to victory. And I believe that the Democratic Party sometimes doesn't want somebody that they can't control. And they can't control me.
Is this your first time running?
Yes, all of us in this primary were first-time candidates.
Okay. So you have the endorsement of Emily's list. What was that like to get, and what's it been like to work with Emily? Because I asked for a reason. I've heard from some other candidates who've been excited when they get the endorsement of not just Emily's list. This applies to progressive lefty groups, to centrist groups, to everybody. When they get these endorsements, sometimes they have to then have their consultants on all their conference calls, and they're sharing all of their budgeting and their campaign information, and they say, oh, I'm glad I got that endorsement, but can you kind of just leave me alone for a minute? So what's been the most surprising thing about that endorsement or other ones that you've gotten?
Well, it's always one of those things where, for me, I'm a business person. I look at everything sort of as an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, you'd never go out and say, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I have to raise $1 million. Now let me figure out what I'm doing." It should always go, "Hey, I'm going to get these votes by doing A, B, and C. Now let me go tell the public why I need $500,000." The consultancy class seems to have something is goofy, way goofy, because they just come up with these amounts and then you have to feed into it. So the process is a little bit backwards in my mind. So for me, just as an individual, it's been a little crazy that the way they do their spreadsheets and everything is completely opposite people would run a normal business.
Because it's all about the money. You mean
it's a lot about the money. Right. It's a lot about the money.
And so, in other words, they'll say, "You need $250,000 this quarter."
Yes. Yeah, or, nobody really knows, but we think we're going to need 30 mailers and we're going to need digital this. I don't know if you need 30 mailers. Maybe you just need a good candidate.
Right.
Maybe you just need a good message. Maybe you just need people to figure out what you're going to do different. Is it all about that you have to hire X, Y, and Z person to win this election? Because it couldn't be. And this is what the money, I'm sure my opponent, I think he's in New York today raising money. I flew in, I fly back tomorrow because I don't like to be out of district. Nobody does this close to an election, but you have to come, get all your family and friends to give you all their money. I worked for the Obama administration for 5 years. I'm asking all people that are concerned about things like corporate concentration and food and nutrition from USDA and care about poor people. Means a lot of those people work in nonprofits. They don't have the $2,700 check, so I have to have a little bit more fundraisers than your standard Democrat.
Tell us about your story. How did you get into anti-monopoly work? How did you get into corporate concentration? Because that is the thing, I think, for our viewers that really does differentiate you around the country. There are a handful of, and at The Intercept, we actually wrote about your race months and months ago as one of a handful that were actually making monopoly issues central to their campaign, and how people respond to that.
Yeah, well, it's been hard. This is another thing, when you do polling, it's not like people wake up and figure out why their wages haven't increased in the last 10 years. In a place like Texas, we still have our minimum wage is $7.25, right? It ain't going anywhere. And it was, the average person in my district or in the North Texas area where I'm running makes, it's like $55,000 or $60,000 a year. We don't have any wage increase, but they don't instantly apply that's because there's only 2 companies in telecom, or there's only 4 companies in the people that distribute eyeglasses or medical supplies. And so I had it very personal. I started a small company with my partners back in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, where we came up with a new way to protect nurses, to make it so nurses felt safer treating HIV patients. And we went to the marketplace. We were categorical, right? So syringes, so that when you got a needle stick, you wouldn't contract HIV or hepatitis. It was something nurses wanted. It was a public health need. The National Institutes of Health gave us our first grant and our first monies. And then when we went up, we just got stopped by the big monopolists, and we had to sue them, and they settled with us, and we sued them again. But we never did get the kind of relief we should have gotten from the agencies in here in D.C., like the FTC and the Antitrust Department. And that was then, and that's 20 years ago, and now it's even worse than it was then.
I assume you were in contact with the party, with the DCCC, throughout the primary. Were you surprised when they came in and endorsed your opponent, or did you see that coming?
I didn't really see it coming. I have all of us that have worked campaigns. I worked on the Obama campaign. I worked on a couple of other campaigns. You know people. And I just figured, what? I've given money to the Democratic Party. I'm somebody who does what they asked me to over my career when I've been able to. I didn't agree with them about Obamacare because I wanted a public option. So I've certainly thrown down a few times and keep doing that, I guess. But right now, I feel like our race is sort of it's almost like a microcosm of really what's wrong with the party. They ought to stay out of these races. They ought to let the people in the 32nd District decide, and I don't think putting their thumb on it really helps. And it also makes it so instead of talking about local issues like education and health care and a living wage, all we talk about is D.C., and that makes it in these gerrymandered districts. I can't win without Republicans and independents. And I don't want to win without them because I don't want to just represent 50% of the population. I think all of us out there running now realize we got to do better. We can't come up here just with our Democratic, brand on. We got to fight for country right now, and that makes it so when we're talking about all this stuff, the Republicans and Independents, they're like, oh, here they go again.
So that's interesting. So when the National Party from Washington comes into these races and inserts itself, I think it backfires in a number of ways. But one of them, you think, is that it shifts the conversation, that people start thinking. Eric, any questions from?
Leanne Meyer wants to know, what's the conversation like in your district on DACA and Medicaid for all?
Yeah, DACA is the first in question always.
Oh, interesting.
We got 124,000 recipients in just in Texas. And so it's one of those things. It's my opponent also. We're both, strident on this issue. We should throw down. We both, for sure. For me, I have 2 Mexican kids, that I adopted. I would fight for DACA recipients like I would my own kids. It's something we need to take care of immediately. And then for Medicaid for all, a place like Texas, complete rejection of any Medicaid expansion.
Right.
And so we just leave all this money on the table, and we talked about that in our debate last night. And, we've got crazy politics in Texas. And I don't think people realize when we have crazy politics, because we have such a big congressional delegation, second only to California, with 38 people coming up here, when we send crazy people up here, we mess it up for all of us. And so when I speak to my audience tonight in Washington, D.C. or anywhere, I always say, you really need to care about what happens in Texas, because when we're off, especially with representatives, because we only have 3 women out of a delegation of 38, and we haven't elected a new woman to Congress for 22 years, it throws the entire conversation off as seen through a woman's lens,
Right.